Well, thank you for joining me for another iTWire video with top IT executives. I'm with Charles Clarke. He is the Technical Director for Veeam Software of the Asia Pacific region. Charles, welcome to the program.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks very much for having me, Alex. It's great to be here.
So please tell us a bit about what Veeam Software does, and a little bit about yourself, and a little bit about your history with Veeam in Australia. Okay,
great. So Veeam Software, first of all, is an independent software vendor. We build solutions that provide availability for the modern data center.
I can see it on the tagline behind you.
It is, yes. Our marketing dollars at work.
Yep.
So by modern data center, what we really mean is a data center that's built on virtualization, modern storage architecture, and the cloud. And by availability, what we really mean is having mission critical applications, or indeed all applications, recoverable within 15 minutes. So it's a lofty goal for many organizations to be able to ensure that availability for those applications and for those services, but that's the problem we're helping organizations solve. From a personal perspective, I have been with Veeam for about 4.5 years. I was one of the first employees in the APAC region, and year on year I've seen the organization expand and explode really across the region and across the world, to the point now where globally we're at 135,000 customers, we've got 29,000 partner organizations, and actually at the end of last year we brought in our $1 billionth of revenue. So we're very proud of that. Very proud of that. Good success story.
Now, just as I'm thinking about it, a question that's popped in my mind. Everyone's talking about hybrid cloud, so you must have solutions for the hybrid cloud as well, where people are using on-premise clouds and public clouds, etc.
Yeah, actually, and that's a great question, because with what we see organizations doing is trying to figure out how they best leverage the opportunity that the cloud presents. Many organizations have made that investment in on-premise infrastructure, they've made their investment in the modern data center. They need to provide for high availability. They need to ensure that data is maintained off-site. At Veeam, actually, we call it the 3-2-1-0 rule. So have 3 copies of your data, one of which is in production, on 2 different media, one of which is off-site with 0 errors in recovery. Now, the off-site portion of that is perfect for the cloud. I need my data off-site, but I still need it to be highly available. So what Veeam are doing is really helping organizations reach from their on-premise infrastructure, reach into the cloud, and use the cloud as part of their disaster recovery strategy.
And just another question that's popped into my head. I mean, I don't know a lot about Veeam, so I'm learning as we go along. But do you do a lot of, have any security modules yourself, or do you work with partners for that? Because security of data is obviously also a key topic.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially when you're talking in the cloud. You know, we've seen sort of, last year we saw high-profile, celebrity pictures hacked on iCloud and all that sort of stuff. So encryption for that data is important. So Veeam actually do encrypt data both in motion and at rest for backup archives that are being delivered up to our cloud partners, so that their tenants in their cloud infrastructure with their hybrid cloud strategy can rest assured that that data is not available to anyone else sharing that infrastructure. In addition, from a networking perspective and from a cloud perspective, we work with our channel partners to really bring in other security vendors that help create a secure availability scenario for their customers.
So who are the sorts of customers you work with globally, and what are some local examples?
Yeah, fantastic. So from Veeam's perspective, anybody that has an investment in the modern data center is a potential customer for us. As I said, we have 135,000 customers globally currently. So we see organizations really embracing virtualization. The interesting thing about virtualization now is that it's become pervasive. So organizations of all sizes, organizations cutting across all sectors, have invested in that technology, and Veeam are there to help them with their availability strategy. So to give you a couple of local examples here in Australia, CB Richard Ellis are a great success story for us here in Australia that also branch up into the Asia Pacific region. We also have a customer with Fortescue Metals Group, who also an Australian customer that a big success story for us.
And I mean, they're quite large companies, but do you also work with small to medium enterprises?
Yes, indeed. As I said, virtualization sort of cuts across all sectors really. So, I'll give you the example of, in education, Brighton Grammar School, a small school, but they've been a long-term Veeam customer. In fact, one of my early customers when I joined Veeam 4.5 years ago. And they've made that investment in Veeam. They've made the investment in modern storage infrastructure and virtualization, and we're helping them hit their availability goals. One thing that is actually interesting from a Veeam perspective is, we think of Veeam being in that sort of corporate space, but actually last year at Veeam On, which is our annual data availability conference, we announced the availability of, or the coming availability of Veeam Endpoint Backup. And what this essentially allows our IT pros to do, not just customers, but allows IT pros to take backups of their endpoint devices. So think here about laptops, think about desktop computers. At Veeam really it's about availability of data, and we came to the realization that organizations maintain a lot of data on devices, on your laptop.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what happens if that explodes?
Yeah, gets lost, stolen, anything.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we really wanted to help IT pros solve that problem. Coming later this year in 2015, we have Veeam Endpoint Backup coming into the marketplace that is going to help solve that problem. The nicest thing, spoken as a true Scotsman, my favourite feature about this is that it's going to be free. So IT pros are going to be able to use Endpoint Backup to back up their endpoint devices, protect that data, but still have recoverability for that going forward.
And is this software that Veeam's written by itself, or have you licensed it from somebody else?
No, this is a Veeam product.
Excellent. Well, it's always good to know too. So, speaking about backup and data loss and downtime, which can happen to anybody, what is the cost of that in real quantifiable terms? You recently did a study.
Yeah, that's right. So last year, at the end of last year, Veeam released our data center availability report, and where we sort of tried to figure out how much it really does downtime cost organizations and how much does data loss cost organizations. The good news is, from an Australian perspective, is that Australia actually leads the world in terms of reducing the cost of downtime. So, for example, the global average cost of downtime per year is about $10 million.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
That's per company, or?
Yes, per organization. Yeah. Global cost of downtime per year is about $10 million. That will be split across, on average, 17 hours worth of downtime per year.
It's a very expensive hour.
Absolutely, absolutely. In Australia, Australian organisations on average have about 10 major IT outages per year, which is still a pretty significant number. And the cost of that is about $5 million per year for Australian organisations, based on our research. So Australian organisations certainly are leading the world in terms of lesser number of outages, and in terms of reducing the cost of that outage by having faster recovery times. And at Veeam, that really is the key thing for us, because if I look at the cost of an outage, there are really two ways for me to belay that cost. Reduce the number of outages, so proactive monitoring, capacity planning, the crystal ball that tells me when I'm going to have an outage so I can avoid it in the first place. Yeah. And secondly, reducing the amount of time that application is not available.
It's offline. Yeah.
So for us at Veeam, the way that we sort of quantify that is in what we call recovery point and time objectives, RPTOs. And we help drive our customers towards RPTOs of 15 minutes or less. The investment in Australia in the modern data centre, the fact that Australian organisations have embraced virtualisation as a technology, really acts as an enabler for them to be able to get towards those RPTOs of 15 minutes or less with Veeam's help.
Now, one of the things we were chatting about before we started recording was the fact my parents are hoarders, and they raised me with some hoarding tendencies. And late, which I'm battling and I'm helping my mum deal with after my father's sad passing. I wish we could, do a high-speed recovery of him, but sadly we can't do that. But we were talking about data hoarding, and that's also a huge issue for people, just like it is for people in the physical world. We see all these hoarding shows on TV, but people just don't want to get rid of stuff. And so how does Veeam help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's really part of a broader data management conversation. What we see is data footprint exploding. We see the Internet of Things. We see all sorts of devices.
Well, so much data is being captured and gathered and analysed, and big data is all being stored in the cloud. It's the buzz.
Absolutely, it is the buzz. And I think that can't continue. That sort of growth in data is going to explode. It's a bubble that's expanding.
Sure. And we've heard about deduplication for years.
Yes, and there are deduplication technologies out there. But if you imagine you're looking at a device, a smartwatch, for example, it's delivering back. It's delivering back all the data points, my sleep patterns, everything. those will be unique for me, and many of those data points will be unique. They need to be secured, and of course, over my lifetime, the volume of data about me alone as an individual is going to exponentially increase. So you imagine all the devices that potentially are generating that. It creates a real data management challenge. So what we see is organizations trying to figure out, well, how do I categorize that data? How useful is that data? How do I get trends from that data and perform analytics against it? And really it's the whole big data conversation. Internet of Things, mobility, big data, the cloud as the sort of overarching sort of backdrop against which that plays, really are all just part of the same thing. They're part of the data management challenge. Data now is the lifeblood that flows through our society.
Absolutely.
And it's incredibly valuable. Alex, I was having a cup of coffee this morning, and the bus went past, and there was a poster on the side of the bus from one of the big telcos here in Australia, and it said, the tagline was, "We've struck data."
I know which telco you're talking about.
You know which telco I'm talking about, right? And so the wee guy standing there with his pickaxe. And so the analogy there is that data, this is for at the consumer level, the analogy is that data is gold, or the data is oil. So the value of that data in our everyday lives is increasingly important, and of course at a corporate level is vital. So from Veeam's perspective, when we think about data management, we need to think about things like capacity planning, we need to think about proactive monitoring to ensure we're avoiding outages, and of course, critically, we need to think about the recoverability of our data, making sure it's available.
That's it. It's no point having a backup if you've never tested it.
Absolutely. That sort of verified protection is really a key thing that we hear from our customers. Actually performing backups of your data, carries a cost against infrastructure. It takes time, and it takes it takes time
to restore it to make sure it works.
It
takes time to have multiple backups.
Absolutely.
It takes time to make sure one of the backups is offline so it doesn't get crypto ransomware, which has happened to friends of mine. Crazy
absolutely,
stuff.
Absolutely. And so making sure that data is available, making sure it's recoverable is really the key challenge that we're helping organizations solve.
And how do you help companies to recover and test? Is it something they do themselves? Is there some sort of virtual environment, or do they just have to have extra computers and say, right, let's restore it to this server and see if it works?
Well, I guess yes to all three of those. Was that three questions?
I'm not sure.
3 questions in there. So essentially yes to all three of those questions. So what Veeam really provides is the ability to verify that those backups are recoverable. We do use a test environment, we use a sandpit environment, leveraging the power of virtualization. We actually recover those services, recover that data within that sandpit environment automatically, and we're able to do that every night or every week or however, whatever level of confidence the organization needs to recover. So it means that hand on heart, as an IT administrator or as the CIO, I can go back to the board or I can go to my CIO and I say, yes, we can recover. How do I know we can recover? Because we did it last night. We do it every night. So rather than, when we talk to organizations, many of them will do an annual DR test. And you see that in your everyday. How often really do you recover? Do you test your time machine backups?
Most people,
they don't, right?
Very rare,
Absolutely.
They become backup experts after they've had the big failure.
Indeed, yes, absolutely.
For a short while, before it becomes, I'll worry about it later.
That's it. And unfortunately, that, as we discussed, that can be a very expensive lesson for organizations.
And consumers can probably get away with it to some degree, but corporations, companies, they can't. Well, they can get away with it once if that doesn't crash their business.
So you look at the cost of downtime, and I said, for Australian organizations across both mission critical and non-mission critical applications, that's about 5.2 million thereabouts. But if you also look at the cost of data loss, so in other words, data that's non-recoverable, so I couldn't pull it out from a backup archive, I hadn't backed up often enough to be able to catch changes in data. The cost of that to Australian businesses is about an additional $2 million per year. So, for organizations, that's a real cost. It's a real challenge that they have to face, and the availability of that data has to be at front of mind for as data becomes more critical to these businesses.
Well, otherwise you haven't got a backup worth having, and if you haven't got a backup worth having, there's no point doing it in the first place.
Exactly.
So, and that's all just common sense stuff.
Indeed.
So, how about the next 12 months in Australia? Some predictions for cloud adoption, major technology megatrends, and then after that, I'll ask you about the longer term future.
Yep, absolutely. So over the course of the next 12 months, I mean, really, I think we're going to see a continuation of the trends that we saw through 2014.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to see the Internet of Things continue its slow journey to being just things. In fact,
well, Internet of everything.
Well, it's the internet, yeah, but I mean, nowadays when we talk about the Internet of Things, we're just talking about everything being connected and to being able to talk to each other. We're getting there, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to see the Internet of Things transform into things. Of course, what that's going to do, as we discussed, is generate more data management challenges, more availability challenges for organizations. So I think we're going to see that happen. I think we're also going to see the continuation of what I call the next wave of virtualization. So this is where we see data centers defined in software rather than physical hardware.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about software-defined.
Yeah, software-defined data center, networking, software-defined storage. It's a bit of a buzzword, but what it really represents is the ability to automate and to make what traditionally were pieces of hardware programmatic.
Yeah.
So from a cloud perspective, that really drives the cloud, because as a cloud provider, I would be able to provision an entire data center in software for a potential customer with no additional capital outlay, and then deprovision that. So I think the next wave of virtualization is going to ride through 2015, all of which, Internet of Things, software defined, the growth of the cloud, all of which increases a growing data footprint that we need to provide availability for.
And so what about looking in the crystal ball for the 2020 vision? What differences do you expect to see in the way that businesses operate, and what might technology's role be in that future?
Yeah, so I think as we look into the longer term, data is going to grow. What I think really is going to happen is that organizations are going to have to think more carefully about their data management profile. We were talking about hoarding. Organizations, in terms of their data, tend to just hang on to everything.
Yeah.
What I think is going to happen is that more policies will come in place about what needs to be kept, how long they need to keep that for. I think actually going into the slightly longer term, we're going to see government regulation realise that organisations can't necessarily maintain all data.
Despite all those data retention laws that they're talking about in Parliament?
Yes, absolutely.
Which is slightly separate. But
no, actually, I mean, it really is. And it's part of that whole story. And I think there is going to be an adjustment to that, I think, or addendums to that, where that sort of, because the data is expensive, as we were talking about, that data management profile is expensive. And so I think organisations are going to have to naturally sort of push back against keeping everything forever. I think as we look longer term, there are some really interesting data management challenges. I think this period in history needs to come up with a way for capturing data for the long term, and I'm talking hundreds of years, thousands of years. And how do we make that available?
Holographic storage.
Well, potentially, but the key challenge becomes availability for that and recoverability for that data. I worry that we're maybe standing on at the start of a potential digital dark age, where going forward in 100 years, how do we recover data that was generated now? I mean, I can't recover data from a floppy disk from 15 years ago. I struggle to do that.
That's it.
So how do we make sure that data is going to be available ad infinitum? So there are concepts like digital vellum being developed and common formats for recovery. Again, the data bubble is expanding. How much of that do we really need to keep to create an archive of our times? And how are we going to make sure that's recoverable in 1,000 years for posterity? So those are some interesting. As I said, data is at the heart of everything we do now. It's the heart of our society. We have to make sure that we're capturing that for posterity, making sure it's available for posterity as well. Yeah,
I mean, father of the internet, as he's called, Vint Cerf, current Google employee, was talking about this just in the last couple of days, and saying people should print everything out. But of course, you go back to paper. Is that going to last 100 years? Probably not. So that's definitely a key issue. And a lot of it will be stored in the cloud, but you've got to have backup. People have to back up their cloud to make sure that it doesn't go down. So.
Well, this is it, and it becomes a question about common file formats and file formats that will last for 1,000 years. I mean, what we see, often with Veeam customers are creating backups and maybe have to keep that data for compliance reasons for 100 years. Let's say, life of a patient in hospital, for example. So, I mean, Veeam's answer to that is kind of similar to digital vellum, where we're able to, with the backup archive, include the means to recover from that backup archive actually inside the archive.
Like a file
itself.
reader of some sort.
Yeah, exactly. So it means that you've got that sort of encapsulated data block that is recoverable. So maybe something like that is off in the far future for all data in the cloud.
Now, a couple of left field questions which were inspired by Ashton Kutcher's visit to Australia last week. One of his questions was, what is the best advice that you've ever received to get you where you are today?
Wow. So the best advice I've ever received, yes, okay, so a piece of advice that many people have received is be yourself.
Yeah.
Always be yourself.
Everyone else has taken this. I think Oscar Wilde said that.
Yeah, be yourself because everyone else has taken, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the piece of advice that I have is probably a little bit of spin on that.
Make a backup of yourself?
Well, I wish we had cloning. I could be in more than one place at once.
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, yes, I wanted to be myself, but what I really wanted to be was the, more charming, more intelligent version of myself.
Yeah.
So
that we all.
indeed, be yourself. But I guess the piece of advice that I was given, when I started presenting, I started public speaking, was be the version of yourself you'd like to see up on stage.
Yeah.
And I've sort of carried that with me through my career.
Well, I think you've done a very good job.
Thank you.
Now, another piece of advice, another question that Ashton Kutcher had, and this was more to companies he was asked to invest in because he invests in a lot of tech companies. And he was talking about how, it's the people that you're investing in, not just their ideas. And so this is sort of, again, a bit out of left field, but he always asked them what their high school hustle was, their life hack when they were younger, maybe not necessarily in high school, that helped them or helped their friends. One of the things he spoke about was, somebody selling candy in high school to their classmates, which actually, funny enough, I did, because my father took me to some big giant candy warehouse, and I turned up to school one day with all these different things, and I started selling it, and I got tapped on the shoulder by a teacher saying, "You can't do that," because the canteen probably wasn't too happy. And somebody else I spoke to said that they figured out they could rent their toys to their friends who wanted to play with them, and with the 10 cents that they got, they could buy a couple of red frogs, which are those little, chewy jelly candy things. So did you have any particular life hack that you figured out when you were younger?
I didn't. There was nothing in particular that I had that was a money-making scheme, and I wasn't about to go into competition with the school canteen.
Yeah. Well, that was just by accident.
I guess the one sort of life hack that I had, I suppose, was growing up. I grew up in the west of Scotland. Mm-hmm. Wasn't particularly good looking. Wasn't particularly intelligent. So this presented a problem for me for my aspirations with members of the opposite sex and general success at high school.
So this could be very interesting what we're about to learn.
Yeah, indeed. So what I sort of decided is me and a few of my sort of geeky friends got together and realised that, let's start a band. And
that works.
So it does. Well, to a degree. So I had no idea how to play, but I bought a guitar. My friends bought guitars. And so we formed the first sort of high school band for a year. Now, actually, what this did is, so first of all, it didn't really attract members of the opposite sex, I have to say, because we were awful. Actually, in 1989, we were voted Ayrshire, the region I grew up in, Ayrshire's worst band, when I was about age 17. Yeah. But what it did is it gave me a sort of sense of performance, I guess. Yeah. We enjoyed playing gigs and having people shout and scream, and then ultimately throw things at us. But it certainly gave me a little sense of performance and made me realise that I sort of enjoyed presenting, and it sort of brought that little part of my character out. Yeah. So I guess that was my sort of life hack, and those lessons that I've learned from that high school period
carried you through to this.
I've carried me through. Yeah. Indeed.
So do you have any final messages for iTWire viewers and readers, and also for your current and potential customers?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the sort of key message really is to think about availability for your data. We see many organizations investing in new IT projects. What they will do is think, we're going to start this new service or sell this new app or whatever it might be. And then of course they'll go through that process and then think, we need to make sure it's available as well. And often that's an addendum. So, my advice and what we work with our customers and partners to help them do is to think about availability up front, because data has to be available. We're in the era of the always-on business. Yeah. Businesses need to provide services 24/7. Availability for that data should be at the heart of it.
All right. Well, Charles, thank you very much. Thanks for putting up with got a bit of a cold, bit of sniffling, but you've been a wonderful interviewee. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.